Welcome, everybody, for another episode of Straight Talk with Dr. Lisa. We give it to you straight, no chaser. And I can't think of a better person to give it to you straight, no chaser than Dr. Coop. How
Are
you
you
doing?
trying to tell a secret on me or something talking about chasers?
How are you, Dr. Cooper? Introduce yourself. Tell these folks about your illustrious career and what you're up to.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa, I appreciate that opportunity. I'm William Cooper. I'm a cardiovascular surgeon, born and raised from our great home.
That's a heart surgeon.
What's that?
That's a heart surgeon.
That's right, a heart surgeon. That's absolutely correct. Born and raised in the great state of Missouri, and have had a really long career at Emory University. I went to medical school and college at the University of Missouri in Kansas City. You and I are classmates.
Yes.
Thank you. And left there and went to Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, where I did 9 years of training post-medical school, and also a fellowship in cardiovascular surgery. Stayed on staff there for about 13 years and did another 6 or 7 years with a private institution in Metro Atlanta. And now I'm associate professor cardiovascular surgery at University of Kansas, and work at North Kansas City Hospital. I'm also an entrepreneur, own 2 businesses, healthcare staffing company, Prime Health, as well as Cooper & Company Consulting. And also 35-year reserve Army veteran, been to 4 military or war theaters, if you will, around the world in the last 15 or so years during my final years in the military. So had a nice career.
Well, I would say so, and you look so young. I would be tired after all that.
I'm not tired. I think I find myself getting more and more curious every day as I get older, and asking more and more questions about why, just about a lot of things, it's fascinating to have gone into medicine at such a young age that you and I did. It afforded us the opportunity at this stage in our careers to take a step back and do some of the things that you're doing and I'm doing, and now just explore. So I'm having a lot of fun. I'm still doing some operating and things like that, but having a lot of fun. Yeah,
well, we're gonna get into that and talk to you about what it's like to actually cut into someone's chest. I want you to tell our audience, so start thinking about this,
Sure.
A story that impacted you the most about someone who was on your table, and the condition with their heart was completely preventable. So we'll circle back to that.
Sure.
But first, I want to just talk a little bit. You wrote a book it's called Heart Attack.
Mm-hmm.
What made you write that book? And what's the biggest lesson you were trying to tell people in that book?
Yeah, so I published that book in 2016, Heart Attack, Truth, Tragedy, and Triumph, available on Amazon if you'd like to buy a copy. It needs to be updated. There's a lot of things in there that we have learned over the last even 10 or so years, but as the book was in evolution, I didn't take the time to go back and update it. But I will do that very soon. But the motivation for me writing that book, Lisa, as you know, is my family history, my family story, having lost my mom. She was 46. I was age 14 when she died. I lost my youngest sister. I lost another sister a couple years after that to a heart attack. I lost a brother, 45 years old, to a heart attack. I lost another brother to AIDS, HIV AIDS, and I lost my oldest sister to cancer. And so out of a family of 10 people, there are only 4 of us still alive. And so over the years, as I would contemplate and progress in my career, I really found I was drawn to people. And more so, not just about going to diagnose and sit at the bedside and understand what their condition was, but really just connecting with people. And these things were happening all throughout this period of time to me. And so I connected with one person that I talk about in my book. I call him the captain. He was a Delta pilot, had flown internationally for over 30 years for Delta. And he connected with me as well. So we became friends. I would wait till the end of the day to make rounds with him, so that and tell everybody else to go on, just so I could sit there literally at 6:30, 6:45 at night and have a conversation with the captain. His name was Mr. Laboutier. And so, one day I was walking out, and this was after about a week in the hospital. He was very ill. And he said, "Wait a minute, Doc." He said, "I just need to tell you this before I forget, because I've been thinking about this." He said, "You should write a book." And so I did. I started journaling and writing things down, and my handwriting is horrible. So the best thing that ever happened to me was a cell phone and a computer, because I could take notes, little notes as I went through. And so ultimately, after about 10 years or so, I published a book in 2016, started writing in 2006, and it came out Heart Attack, Truth, Tragedy, and Triumph. The truth is my story and the story of my family. And it's not all about heart, but what it is about, however, is, and if you think about each one of their stories, it's a microcosm of everything that is out of balance in our healthcare system. There's an issue there of personal responsibility. There's an issue there of mental health. There's an issue there of emptiness and a lack of empathy from our healthcare system, insurance issues, access issues, expertise issues, sort of this apathy. And so the book really tries to capture that through telling this story and other stories of people who had very dramatic experiences as it relates to, predominantly heart-related stuff, but also some other things that had nothing to do with heart. But it was about telling those stories and really beginning to understand the truth behind what really happens to us. And the tragedy being the fact that these are preventable problems. These are things that we can change as individuals, as a society, as a system. And then the triumph is about how do we begin to even have that conversation about how we can overcome these problems. And so that is sort of the essence of the book and sort of how it sort of plays out in terms of the narrative.
Well, let's talk a little bit about some solutions. And you mentioned something which is a dirty little word, personal responsibility. Now,
Yes.
It depends on who's talking about it and what they're saying. But I want people to hear from you about this personal responsibility as it's related to your health, particularly your heart health. So what's your take on that, since you mentioned it?
Yeah, so I'm going to go on record just so if somebody tries to steal it out, I can come back and I can go after them. But the title of one of my books is going to be Put Me Out of Business, Please. Because the fact of the matter is that 80% plus of the things that I treat as a heart surgeon, you're sort of at the end of the spectrum. These things are really preventable. And they're preventable because we have the power, quite frankly, to change the pathway or change the direction of our lives. Now, some things are going to happen. I think the healthcare system in some ways is responsible for that. Okay. We have the wrong narratives. And I'll just give you an example of the narrative issue. Heart disease. What do you always hear about heart disease? Heart disease is the number one killer. Let me ask you something, Dr. Lisa. Can you prevent death? Can you prevent
Well, it's coming for all of us one way or another.
Exactly right. You may be able to delay it. And if you're a good doctor, yes, there are a lot of circumstances where you can delay it. You cannot prevent death. So why are we even talking about it? Heart disease is the number one killer. Yeah, we know that. But what we don't talk about is that heart disease is the third biggest cause of disability, loss of quality of life, loss of access to do things with your grandchildren and your family and your friends. And you're living your life in the doctor's office to get a quote checkup, to get a pill, to have them drain this abscess or that abscess. You're spending your life basically helping our economy because you're on a lot of drugs. Okay. And the drug company prices are going to continue to go up. But these things are largely preventable. So when I talk about personal responsibility, it really comes back to us. Now, there are some underpinnings to that, to why those things exist and why we have these problems. It's not all an individual's fault, but we have to be aware of the traps that are out here, not necessarily set by intention, but set out of a convenience for us. And if we're aware of those things, we can make a difference and we can make a change.
So when you say these traps, are you talking about how they put the Easter candy like right at the register for when you walk out of the store? And I can't resist the jelly beans.
Well, let me tell you, Eva, if historically, if you think about, let's think about the one thing that everybody loves to talk about, obesity, for example. And we talk about it being related to the Industrial Revolution and going from the Industrial Revolution to a more service-based, technology-based economy and people being more sedentary, coming out of the fields and things like that. But to some extent, that same economy and culture was driving some of the things that we saw. So you think about this now, you go back, and I don't have all the dates exactly right, but if you think about farming, we are the most efficient society in the world at farming. We make more food than we can eat by 1,000 times. That's a whole nother issue, but yet we have people who are hungry. All right.
Yeah.
But we make more food than we can actually eat, and we make more food than we can actually sell. So what do? We package it up into these large packages. When you and I were in grade school, elementary school, high school, perhaps even, you would go to the corner store and you would get a pack. You would buy potato chips for 25 cents a bag or 10 cents or whatever it was. And it was
just really dating us now. That's true too.
It was the small bag, right? Now you can only get the regular 1 serving size bags in the snack packs. And there's 24 of them in the snack packs. I have children, so I know. There's 24 in there. Okay. We went from the little small Coke soft drink bottles to everything's now the big gulp. You remember the big gulp?
Supersize me. Yeah.
I remember going to McDonald's way before the Big Mac, and it was just a little hamburger like that. Now it's double. You got the big double mother. You got the Whopper and all these other things. So the overconsumption, but simultaneously with overconsumption, there was a drive in the early 80s when you and I were thinking about going to medical school. If you recall, there was this big thing about saturated fat and fat in foods, right? Mm-hmm. So what did the industry do to respond to that? The industry took out the fat and put in what? Sugar. Absolutely. It is literally in everything that you eat. I go to the store sometimes. I'm so frustrated because you can't buy anything even the stuff that's supposed to be organic, vegan, all that. Look at the added sugar that's in there.
Yeah.
Okay? So we talk about that. Another example, last example, the opioid epidemic, for example. Okay. Then this is where you talk about a systemic problem. Okay. This is where you talk about an over-policing or over-regulation problem. What did we have to do in the 70s? Doctors started getting dinged for patients in the hospital with pain. Oh, you got to treat pain. You got to treat pain. So guess what the industry did? The industry came up with some really powerful pain pills. 80% of people who end up addicted to opioids start from the healthcare system. They're not out on the street just randomly asking for it. They're getting it legitimately through prescriptions. So if you think about all of and so when I say traps, I'd say these things are out there in our society for various reasons, convenience. There's some of conspiratorial kind of stuff, but we have to be aware. And if we are aware, okay, if we are informed about these things, and then we heighten our awareness when our impulses take us to the level of wanting to indulge, we can say, hey, wait a second. We need to start talking to ourselves a little bit more. Hey, William, I'm not going to eat that because that's bad for me. I'm going to feel bad after I eat it. I'll be guilty. I don't want to feel guilty, William. I'm not going to eat that. I'm going to eat some vegetables. I'll feel much better tomorrow because my stomach won't be so bloated. I'll wake up in the morning. I'll have energy and I can go to work and feel good. We need to start talking to ourselves through those things.
But I think part of the problem is unless you have been off those foods long enough to recognize how amazing you feel without it, you wouldn't know. And I've gone through this myself. I've eliminated all those sugars for
addiction.
Yes. So for 3 weeks, I was off the sugar. But those, the first few days, it was really difficult. But after I got it out of my system, I felt amazing. And I would not have known that. And so I think that's part of the problem. And I'm glad we're talking about this. So let me just stop for a second and invite those who are listening to us. If you have a question for Dr. Cooper, go ahead and leave your question. Also, Dr. Cooper, don't forget, in a few minutes, you have to tell us that story, like the best story about a patient on your table. For those of you who are joining us, Dr. Cooper is a heart surgeon, and he's going to tell us one of his most impactful stories across his career. So make sure you leave your questions and comments for us if you have one for Dr. Cooper. So Dr. Cooper, I'm going to invite, let's see, do we have a guest to join the show? Maybe not. Maybe our guest will join us later. But why don't you tell us a little bit about what it's like to do heart surgery? I mean, that's just such a crazy thing. Like, to me, heart surgery and brain surgery, like those are the two things you want to make sure the person who is cutting into your brain and cutting into your heart, like they know what they're doing. Like that's real. That's real intense, right? So tell us about that.
Yeah, Lisa, I'll tell you, the first time I did it, actually the first time I had an epiphany that I could do it, we were in medical school. I was on a rotation with the group at Menorah Medical Center in Kansas City, and I got called in the middle of the night to do a case with one of them, and something just snapped in my head and said, you can do this. This is you. And I will tell you that, from that day forward, that next morning, I was tired and, all the other things that come along with being up all night, but I really never turned back. I said, this is for me. This is what I want to do. The first time I did it, however, it's interesting about training. It takes about 10,000 hours, they say, to do a repetitive practice to become an expert at just about anything.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I look back on those hours and I say, wow, I really put in the hours to get here. And that really served me very well, because the first time I walked in, it was an evolutionary process. It was just all eyes on you, your first time doing this by yourself. I'll never forget the day. I'll never forget the case. This heart really, it was a surreal experience, because it was like, it was interesting because all of that training and all those hours and everything just sort of seemed to come right into that theater and just overwhelmed me. And I basically did it. I mean, I did it, but even after having done it literally hundreds of times while I was training, to be there on your own and to have that power, and to have that much authority and responsibility over someone's life. I cried after that operation. It was at Crawford Long Hospital. I did. I went, nobody saw it, but I went in and I was like, man, all of that stuff that I went through, and here I am. I had the opportunity today for the very first time to put my hands on someone's heart and have sole responsibility for the outcome of that procedure. That was pretty powerful. And so I never take that for granted. And the people who work with me know that Dr. Cooper comes in the morning, no small talk. I just, because I'm so focused on the fact that I've got to touch somebody's heart here today. It's an extremely high responsibility, and that's really the kind of the only way I can say it. But I'm very humbled by that, and I'm also humbled by the resilience of the human body to undergo some of the things that we put it through.
Right.
Yeah, particularly the heart. I mean, hearts are very, very strong, and let me tell you, I mean, I've seen 80-year-old people, and I said this 2 weeks ago with a gentleman that I operated on. I really hope my heart's as strong when I'm 80 years old. I mean, he had another structural problem just from aging, but I mean, his heart was it was the heart of a 15 or 16-year-old.
And why is that? How do we maintain the heart of a young person? What do we have to do?
Yeah, so Lisa, I think what we have to do, and I'm gonna go to a very, I could sit here and say exercise, diet, and all that. That's so played, that's overplayed. I just think that what we have to do really is, I think we need to take a step back. And we need to ask ourselves, what kind of person do we want to be? Who do you really want to be? Do you want to be, I mean, I'm just going to put it to you, keep it real. The big fat slob sitting on the couch, eating potato chips and watching, and playing video games. I mean, if that's the life you want, God gave you the opportunity to choose that. Okay. But I think what we have to do is take inventory and say, okay, what kind of life do we want? And understand that we have the power. Okay. And then we have to plan. We have a plan for everything else. I talk about this so much. We plan for finances. We got our plan, our educational plans. We got our sick plans. They aren't health plans. But what we really need is a health plan. We really need to plan every single day of our life. And I've started to do that. It took me a long time to realize, but I started to do this in the last maybe 5-10 years. I'm really thinking about, what am I going to eat today? How am I going to eat? How am I going to get exercise? I wake up every morning and I'm refining that as I go. Now starting to plan that out a week in advance, looking at my schedule and say, hey, where are the traps here? Where am I going to have to go out to dinner and we're going to be drinking wine and eating steak? Maybe I can plan. No, I'm not going to do that. Maybe I'll do like I did last night. I had wonderful fillet of halibut and mushrooms and green beans. It was fantastic. I felt great this morning. So we have to start becoming aware and be conscious eaters, conscious planners, and really start thinking about the most valuable asset we have. Above all is our health, this beautiful, wonderful machine that God gave us.
Yeah, it takes a lot of discipline. I struggle with this. over and over and over again. People think, doctors know all the secrets and we know what to do, but we're human just like everyone else. I like to remind people that we stumble, we fall, we get into these same traps, but that discipline is, it's a hard one.
It is. It is. It is. I've been reading a lot about the power of habits. A very good book, a wonderful book, and I've started reading other people's perspectives on the issue of developing habits. So I'm really sort of starting to see the power in that, and the power of planning, the power of really, and how what we need to do with that, Lisa, as we struggle to become disciplined, is we have to continue. We have to do small steps. See, the diets don't work because they're trying to eat the elephant in one bite. They're trying to lose 100 pounds overnight. It's not going to work. It's just a little thing. So I've started focusing a lot more on just the little simple, minutest things. Do that for a few days and then add on to it, stacking your habits. So they're all good habits. So I'm beginning to think a lot about the habit. I'm thinking about triggers in my life. I'm very gregarious. I love to be around people. I take a drink. I may take 6 drinks and not even know it until I feel like crap and say, oh my God, and so understanding those triggers and beginning to really figure out, what are the things that are tipping you overboard, and the things that are motivating you or unmotivating you, if that's a word, to not do the things that you need to be doing for your health.
Yeah. Well, we've got a couple questions for you, Dr. Coop.
Sure.
So let's see. The first one is from Miss Lewis. What would you recommend for reversing atherosclerosis? That's a big word, so you need to tell us what that is. And is it even possible to remove the plaque from your artery? So before you answer her question, just please help people understand what she's asking you for, in case, everybody is not quite there where Miss Lewis is.
Yes, absolutely. So what Ms. Lewis is asking us is atherosclerosis is the medical terminology for what most people commonly refer to as hardening of the arteries or buildup of plaque. And one way to think about that, ladies and gentlemen, as nasty as it is, it's very similar to the plaque that's on your teeth.
Yes.
There's calcium, there's white blood cells, there's all kinds of stuff that floats around in your saliva. So if you ever have to go to the dentist, or if you were one of those people like me who loves to scrape that crap off their teeth every few days, that's what it's like. So you imagine that scum that's on the inside of your arteries, your body, and it starts with an injury to the lining of the inside of the body. Then your body wants to heal. So just look at your body. Somewhere you've got a scar. We all do. And what happens is that same scarring process is happening on the inside. But unfortunately, it's an incomplete repair process, and it heals by heaping up all this stuff and then hardening or blocking off the artery. Okay, so that's a very fundamental process that goes on when people have built up a plaque. What is it caused by? It's caused by high blood sugar, diabetes, hypertension, cigarette smoking, obesity. It's caused by a number. Some people are genetically predisposed to it. So those are some of the things that cause it. Can it be reversed? And what we have learned, Ms. Lewis, thank you for that question. In the last 15 to 20 years, we're getting more and more information that a plant-based diet is an antidote for reversal of cardiovascular disease, commonly called or known as atherosclerosis, commonly known as hardening of the arteries or plaque buildup inside arteries. Yes, it's reversible, but you have to be very, very meticulous with it and very, very serious about it. There's also a weight loss component that comes along with it. There's an anti-inflammatory component that comes along with it. But yes, it can be reversible, but you've got to be really, 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 really fastidious and determined to get there with it. But it can be reversed.
Wow, that's good information. I wish we had more time because I want to talk about, these diets. There's so much food confusion. Like you're just talking about the plant-based diet, but the studies are coming out and they keep conflicting each other and confusing people. So
yeah, I think there's so much confusion and overlap, and then the terminology overlaps, and it's not appropriate terminology. I will tell you, I hype this guy up because I read his stuff and I think he's really got it. Dr. Greger, Michael Greger, I think is how you say it, Greger, nutritionfacts.org. He's very heady, of course, But if you really get down to the basics of it, it's great information for understanding nutrition from A to Z and back again. I really like that site for getting information about nutrition and what's appropriate and what's not.
All right. So we have one more question for you, and then you have to tell us that story we've been waiting for.
Okay.
So we have a question from Stuart Scott, who's supposed to be in the show. Like, Stuart Scott, what are you doing outside the show asking your question? But he wants to know, my father had 3 heart attacks. My mother had one. What should I be doing health-wise to prevent one as a type 1 diabetic?
Wow. There's a lot there. Okay. So first and foremost, you have what we call an unmodifiable risk factor. And that means
he can't change it.
You can't change it. You cannot change your family. And most of us wouldn't if we could, so.
Is that true, William?
Well, that's for most of us. I said most. But I will say that so you have an unmodifiable risk factor. And that is, you can't change it. You can't change your genetics. So your genetic makeup is suggesting that you are at high risk. And you also now have one that may also be genetic and unmodifiable, because type 1 diabetics, quite frankly, do have a very strong genetic component. But they have a much stronger problem, a much more difficult problem, because they have cells that are unresponsive to insulin. At a very, very young age. Okay. And so now you've got that whole milieu of inflammation and how all of that works together to create atherosclerosis. So here's what you need to be doing, my friend Stuart Scott. Well, first of all, you've taken the first step, which is you are aware, So here's what you do. You have to take care of all those other things that you can do to avoid exacerbating or making your situation worse. I do a talk and I call it, this is your disposition. It is not your destiny. So just because mama and daddy had heart attacks doesn't mean you have to have a heart attack. You're in a very tough disposition because you have a family history, but your destiny is in your own hands. And that destiny has to do everything about you. You can control it to some extent by the choices you make, the foods you eat, the things the exercise that you do, because if you don't, you are putting yourself at high risk. Staying away from smoke. If you are a middle-aged man, we like to go and do the 19th hole when we play golf and smoke a cigar. You can't do that. You don't even need to be around any type of smoke, because we don't know the dose response and what that's going to look like, even in some of the most vulnerable people, let alone people who don't even have your risk factors, who expose to secondhand smoke and they end up with lung cancer and coronary artery disease. So do everything you can in the healthy categories. You need to keep a body mass index, the BMI, your weight down at less than 25, certainly less than 28, which is really the overweight cutoff. So you've got to be thinking about holistically approaching this from every angle that you can to try to lower your risk factors: hypertension, cholesterol, diabetes, weight loss, exercising, avoiding smoking, excessive drinking and alcohol intake. Anything that you hear that adds to your risk, you need to avoid that and you need to change it today.
You know what? I think we have to start adding streaming to that list. During the pandemic, I find myself watching more TV than I ever have.
I'll tell you, I got used to the series. I enjoyed getting caught up on some of these ongoing series like Ozark and some of those, and Narcos.
And they get you no commercials. But someone was telling me streaming is the new smoking. So. Anyway, we've come to the end of our time, and we promised everyone who's listening that you're going to tell us you've cut into 1,000 hearts or more, haven't you? So we want to hear from you.
10,000. I think.
10,000. Wow, that's amazing.
Yes.
That means you either work 24 hours a day or you're just old. Which one is it?
that means we got started very young, Lisa. So we've been doing it.
We did.
At our very young age, thanks to UMKC, our medical school. So yes.
Yeah, you have an incredible experience. So tell us, out of all these cases you've seen, is there one that impacts you the most, or one you want to share with us before we go tonight? Something we could learn to take home with us.
Oh, absolutely. This is for the women out there. And again, I'm all about the black girl magic, but we need some black man magic. But this one, black man, this is for the women. And this is a white woman, tennis player, thin, and it gets to the heart of some issues that I think we have to address in our healthcare system about inequities in healthcare. Tennis player, she's going around doing everything she needs to do. I mean, if you look at her, she looks like blonde hair, blue eyed, could be on the cover of Vogue magazine. Was having some weird just sensations, went and got her teeth pulled, wisdom teeth taken out because she was having this jaw pain that she felt like, and the dentist said, oh yeah, well, maybe let's get the wisdom teeth out. Still continue to have this jaw pain. Then started having these weird anxiety episodes. No real chest pain. And she eventually ended up with a cardiologist. They ended up taking a look and, basically doing a stress test on her. Everything came back. She's still working and now starting to have anxiety episodes and panic attacks. Well, one Saturday afternoon, she was at one of the small town around the city of Atlanta, not far from the hospital I worked at, and she passed out. She literally went into cardiac arrest right there on the spot, dropped dead in the square at a little small town.
Oh, now, no.
Yeah. So she's 36 or 37 years old at this time. And again, I'm telling you, she looks like she walked out of a magazine or could be on the cover of a magazine. Two small little girls, husband who's, about the same age. And so she rolls into our hospital. They take her straight to the cardiac cath lab. That's where they do the angiogram, where they look at the arteries to see what's going on. She's got a blockage in the main artery, what they call the widowmaker.
So she's not dead.
She's not dead. They were able to revive her.
Oh, you said she dropped dead. I felt bad.
She did, but her heart stopped, and with CPR, they were able to revive her. Okay. So they got her in. They brought her into the cath lab, and a cardiologist took her back, and he tried to get into this blockage that she had in the main artery on the front of her heart. And I wasn't in the hospital at the time. I was home, and luckily I don't live very far, so I was there within 20 or 30 minutes. He said, "Look, I can't get this open." And I looked at her, and literally she was blue as my jacket, and she had this frothy fluid coming out of her mouth, pulmonary edema, and they're literally still doing CPR.
That's fluid in your lungs. Yeah.
It's fluid in your lungs. We call it pulmonary edema, but it's just because the heart's not pumping, the fluid has to go somewhere. So it's backing up into your lungs and causing damage to the lung alveoli, or the air sacs in your lungs. Mm-hmm. And so I went into the waiting area to talk to the family. And there they were. I mean, literally this family attacked me. And I don't say that in a bad way, but literally these two little white girls, and I don't know what their home situation was like, but they saw me as a savior, somebody that could take care of their mom. And they ran over and grabbed me by the legs, and the husband came and grabbed me around the neck, grabbed me by the shoulders. "Doc, you got to do something. You got to do something." I literally walked in that room, Lisa, to tell them that she was going to die. And I looked at him in the eye. I looked at these little girls who were with them, and then other family members started to show up. And something told me that this is going to live, and you're going to save her life. You're going to take this lady to this operating room, and you're going to fix her. And I said, "You know what? I really don't think we're going to be able to get her through this." But I went in that room with my intention to tell them that she was going to die, that we're going to pronounce her dead. And I walked out. They were still doing CPR. It was very quick. And I said, "Guys, we're going to surgery." We took her into the operating room, and we put her quickly on the bypass machine, and we got in there as fast as I could get in there. Got everything. They were already there setting up, and they were like, "Dr. Cooper, we're going." So we went in, and we were able to do a bypass on two blood vessels to her heart, main artery on the front of her heart. And literally 7 days later, she walked out of the hospital.
What?
And I will tell you that she was very, very sick for the first 2 to 3 days. But, therein, to me, I just say that, that was not about me. That was about me being in the right place at the right time and having the right spirit and the right aura around me. Because I walked in there with the intent to tell this family that that she's going to die. We can't save her. And there was something about that connection with that family at that moment that just said, they were sending me a message and said, "Oh, yes, you can." And it wasn't done I said attack, but they attacked me in terms of, to them, I was Jesus Christ walking in that room. And that really touched my heart. That gave me, and that was, I wasn't 10 years out in my career at that time, but that was really, really very, very powerful for me. I've had a lot of moments like that. And it really it humbled me even further to understand the tremendous responsibility that I have as a physician, and all of us as physicians have, to do all we can to take care of people.
Wow. Well, that was certainly worth the wait, Dr. Coop. That's a very, very inspirational story. So thank you so much for being here today and for just the example you are for our community, for the Black community, for Black men, young boys. I'm so grateful to know you. So,
well, thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate it. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Ms. Lewis. I see your question. Yes. Thank you.
We'll definitely have you back. So everybody who's watching, thank you for being here. And we'll see you next week. Straight Talk with Dr. Lisa.
Take care, Lisa. Bye-bye, everybody.